Good morning. Thank you for being here at this perfect temperature of 16 degrees. I read about this a long time ago, that 16 degrees is a perfect temperature. So Sunday morning, to be with us. Andries was saying this might keep people away. It's titled Trigger Warning, but you came nevertheless. So thank you very much for being here this morning. My name is Kopano Ratele. I work at Stellenbosch University, and I can plug. I was wondering why I am supposed to be facilitating this discussion with these three different, incredible books, but also because I wrote a book called Why Men Hurt Women and Other Reflections on Love, Violence, and Masculinity. So this is how I'm going to do it. We'll do maybe 2 rounds of questions and responses, and then we'll open it up. How's that? That's great. And I have a lot of questions, but I wanted just to do 2 for each of them. So we probably haven't seen some of the books or all of the books. So let me start with Andries. Just Andries, also maybe before you respond, you just say something about yourself so people can just locate you, position you. But here's something I want us to start with at the beginning, as they would say. So take us back. There's a moment at the beginning of the book, a blow to the head, a history of violence, which could also have been an introduction to violence, as you say somewhere in the book, or another title. So Andries tells us about this moment in a cafeteria. I read it at night in bed. I read it again last night. So I got it first the proofs, and then when I got the book, I had this incredible, unusual response to what you were describing. I mean, a visceral fear. It was such an unusual thing, odd, unpleasant, really.
You're really selling the book now.
Let me just say. So you could read it for people if you want. You could immediately start telling people about those moments. I'd like you to find some words to talk about this without giving everything away, but probably just read it because it's best heard. So describe for those who have not read the book or read about your experience at the gym.
Yeah, I'll say a few things about the experience and also why it led to the book. So thank you everyone for coming to a session which has the trigger warning right on the title. I'm Andries du Toit. I'm a white male, eldest son and only son in an Afrikaans family. That's Crown Prince status right there. And in a way, the book is about a process of discovery that started on a morning in Greenpoint Virgin Active 8 years ago. And not too many spoiler, but what happens is Andries sees a group of white men being really quite rude and disrespectful towards a black server in the cafeteria. And I get it into my head to gently challenge these men on their rudeness and the fact that what they're doing might even be construed as being racist. And things don't go well. The men get very aggressive. One of them threatens to slit my throat. One of the men gets up and spits in my face. All this in front of the Virgin Active. Other customers and staff at Virgin Active don't intervene. And it turns out the man says to me, and pardon my language, do you know who I am? I'm the biggest fucking criminal in Cape Town. Which later turns out to be no exaggeration. I had actually managed to stumble into a confrontation with men who were major figures in Cape Town's criminal underworld. People who many of my friends and colleagues had heard about before. I hadn't. I must have been living under a rock. But so there's this extremely frightening confrontation, which ends with the one man taking, in a way, promising me payback and taking out his iPhone, and then very ostentatiously taking a picture of me, obviously signaling to me, we're going to find you again. And, well, they did. A few weeks later, I got roughed up in a parking garage in Cliff Street. And I suppose the book works on two levels. And I don't know where we're going to go today, but the one level is, in a way, you can use that incident as a kind of introduction to South Africa. Like, what can we learn? What can I learn? What this incident tells us about what's happening in race relations and what is happening in whiteness at that particular moment in the cafeteria. So I explore that, and I think those are some of the themes that we might go into a little bit later. Right. That's, however, is not why the book got written. The book got written because, well, the scars faded, and life went on. But as time went on, I realized that I hadn't quite done with this incident, or it hadn't quite done with me. And die ding het by my gespook. And I found myself more and more that I was actually in quite a dark place in my life for many reasons, but one of them was I realized this thing was still with me, so I needed to go on a bit of I needed to become a detective and figure out what actually had been happening there, and why did I need to get myself into this trouble to begin with. What did I think I was doing? I mean, you can say Andries was hashtag standing up against racism, yay Andries, but that wasn't a satisfying answer, and that kind of probably a slightly self-serving take on what was going on there. But I needed to figure out what was going on for me there. And the only way in which I could do that was I had to sit down and find my way into the forest and follow the trail of the spoor and try to see what was lurking in the darkness and use writing as a kind of a tool. And I mean, in a way, you read the book and tell me what you think you found there. But that's an attempt. It was also an attempt to put myself into question and to say what am I about being a white man in this society here and now? What am I doing here? What am I trying to achieve? What am I about? How am I part of this country? And that's really sort of the more elusive and troubling questions that open up out of the book.
And you did write a blog just almost a few days later, right?
Yes.
To make sense of that.
So there are two confrontations and they're the kind of the trigger warning moments. And I must say, I was very aware when I was writing, I have to think about the impact on the readers. This is not easy stuff to write, and it's not easy stuff to read. So I was really struck by your what you said there. But the two confrontations, the encounter with the white gangsters in the club, and the encounter with their muscle in the parking lot later.
The black dude, the big black dude.
He's a black dude. Yeah. Those I wrote days afterwards. I mean, I had to sort of get it out, but it took 8 years to find the beginnings of the thread, to figure out where I stand in relation to all of this.
Okay. Let me go to Nathan. Nathan's book is called Die Man wat jy kennis vang. It's about the events from about 1983, really, right? Or 86, 83, 86? But coming out years later, up to to the dawn of the new democracy. You gave me a lot of work, good work, because I started at the book lounge to read the book. I sat in the book lounge when I got it, and then I had to keep on getting up to go into to some people who work at the book lounge. So what is Nathan? How do you say this word? It's written in Kapsa, right?
Yeah.
It's fantastic. You have to. It's a beautiful book. I mean,
Thank you. Man.
It's a graphic novel. I see somebody I work with here who likes graphic novels in the audience. So it's a graphic novel, and it's a fantastic. But let me start with the later in the book, maybe middle of the book. There's a moment when Nathan, and I never quite know whether it is a fictional story, right? It's fiction. So, but here's Nathan. Mami V as Nelson Mandela. Do say and I board way. As a man wat die kennis vang, maar klaar, je gaan Latvia's for school, right? When I'm reading this, Nathan is saying, man, the main character, the will be writer, Damien.
Yeah.
He's saying Mandela is the railway raper, right? That's one interpretation. So that moment is really funny. It's tragic, it's provocative in a kind of academic sense, and it's South African, right? It's a Cape Flats, which I have some connection with. It's also confusing. I think it's confusing to Damien. It's confusing to me. What is Nathan saying? So please talk to us about that. What you're saying about that, beyond the mother who's needless to answer the son's question.
Well, I think I should start with saying it's confusing to me as well. But anyway, thank you for everyone being here. Thank you for everyone coming. At Trantraal. And kind of look. Since it's a conversation about trauma, I think it's actually appropriate to go here as well. Is that the way we grew up, where I grew up, and trauma was brushed off. That's one layer of it. Trauma gets brushed off, right? I understand it actually. It's a coping mechanism. Like what you're going to do, are you going to keep the children at home forever? So that's part of it. Other part of it is a kind of willful ignorance. Obviously, it's just kind of saying whatever comes to mind. Now I try to write. I try to separate it from myself. So, like for instance, with this book, I created this character of Damien. So that's not me, but it's always kind of clear. It's like when you go to the psychologist to say, "No, I have a friend who has this problem." So it's a bit like that. Like so, I always give up pretending like halfway through. You know. But yeah, so when I looked at that kind of, there's a certain carelessness to it in the way that things are dealt with. And for take that character, for instance, right? That's a very loaded thing to say about Nelson Mandela. But the character, the mother, was one of the few people probably in Diamond's life who's not racist. She's not kind of caught up in all these things. But he lives in a neighborhood and in a place and has family. They're all extremely racist. So that kind of what she says kind of links to all that racism for him, because it's like he's trying to first, and that's not kind of explicitly said in the text, but this is someone who's trying to find his kind of his own ideology, trying to understand kind of the place he lives, right? So that's another thing to say that kind of confuses him. So Nelson Mandela is this person who he's supposed to be scared of. I think if you further in the text, it's kind of like I don't actually know if it's in that text, but where it's now he's going to go to school now and be on the lookout for Nelson Mandela, who could be anywhere.
Yeah, yes, it's a book. Yeah.
And it's kind of it's a strange thing. It's a strange thing to connect to such a serious topic as well. You know what I mean? You kind of it's not like that's not a political question. This is someone who's killing children, and you ask you kind of the railway rapper in the story now, was based on the station Strangler. That's someone who kills children, you're asking who's Mandela, I always at someone who kills children as well. So that whole kind of thing just kind of mixes in your head. And I think in some way that also becomes sort of symbolic of that experience, is where everything becomes mixed up, the violence, the politics. There's no kind of distinction between whether one thing starts and the next ends. You always kind of, there's so many things that you're competing with at the same time in your head, all the time. And that's kind of a very small example, actually, of that. It courses through the lives of South Africans. I wouldn't say colored people, but South Africans really, like those kind of threads courses through our lives.
So 2 connections already. I mean, so both books about trauma of different kinds, and then the racism as well that you just touched on. So thanks for that, Nathan. Let me turn to Lesedi, and he's got this line, and I wanted to see him in person. He's got this line in the book earlier on. He says, I'm that kind of tall and conventionally attractive man. Is he like that?
Somebody said that to me, and I just repeated it. A friend said that.
So I just started checking out whether he's tall and attractive. Yeah. Okay, I'm looking at you. But I want to start.
Wrong.
Start.
Absolutely.
I want to start right there. So this book is in one sense, it's a different kind of book. It reminds me of a particular book. I'm not going to mention it. It's a memoir, but sometimes it reads like fiction, right? So it is well written. Congratulations! It's like really well written. So I enjoyed that sentence about being tall and conventionally attractive. But you also, earlier on in the book, you tell us about yourself as someone raised by a mother who inculcated this thing of having an impenetrable sense of self-belief,
Right.
self-love, but you end up, as you tell us in patient 12A, you end up feeling, and I'm going to use some words you use several times in the book, feeling fucked, right? Experiencing low mood, feeling empty and dull, feeling helpless.
Sure.
So introduce us to Lesedi, to the book, with that.
Sure. I don't usually introduce myself as that, by the way. In that particular moment, where do I begin, actually? I guess for people that just kind of have no idea what my book is about, first of all, good morning. But I guess like just for anybody who has no clue, so sort of kind of my story begins essentially in 2016 when I was really struggling. A, I was feeling burnt out at work, and B, I was really struggling to connect emotionally with the people around me. And I think that's when the instinct first arrived that there actually might be something I'm not quite tapping into. A friend of mine described me as being like a zombie, and he watches a lot of The Walking Dead, so it's a pretty credible opinion he had. And in a lot of ways, that's how I felt. It's just I wasn't aware that people could see it, that others could see it, and really the story begins in there for me, where quite quickly I learned that I that deeply dysfunctional and traumatic childhood that I had actually was having a really big influence on the man I'd become. And in hindsight, being the man that I am today, it makes no sense that I wouldn't think that my childhood would have had such a profound effect on who I am, because like you said earlier, we keep it moving, right? And most importantly, we suppress as a measure of survival, because it's hard to do compassionate self-inquiry of any kind when you're in the business of surviving every single day. You sort of have to get on with it, and so after I guess partly surviving my childhood, I was now in a place where it was a little bit more still. You know, things were quietening down. I just moved out of home. There was some distance between me and my family. And I think for the first time, I was actually listening to my own body. And that's when I felt fucked. You know, there was something dull. There was something that just wasn't. And so, you know, that line about being sort of tall and commercially attractive was in the context that, you know, around people just didn't imagine that I had had the kind of life that I'd had, or that I felt as depressed as I did, and that I was as repressed as I was, and you know, essentially a lot of it is about kind of uncovering all of those deeply traumatic, deeply dysfunctional, racialized, violent experiences that I had as a child in the context of sort of like in the clinic, you know. The book is really just me kind of returning to myself in some way, or trying to, to go against so many of the things that I identified with, you know, like, just sort of like, you know, kind of how subtly racialized identities form for like even black kids in South Africa. As represented for me by sort of like, you know, shortening my name, you know, Lesedi to Lee, you know, for the ease of others' tongues, you know, and then kind of being in the clinic and going, actually, man, forget that, it's Lesedi, you know. So yeah, I just kind of, it was really me kind of using a lot of the sessions and a lot of that quiet time, a lot of that kind of, as they call it, clinic compassionate self-inquiry, to ask myself questions about growing up in this country, to ask myself kind of questions about my family, and how traumatized they are as well. And the picture that emerges is it's a bit harrowing. It's you know, in a lot of ways it was deeply kind of unsettling even for me, you know, because it was one trauma after another. You know, it was one violent incident after another, and in order to be able to survive the next one, you kind of have to get past the last one. And so, in really sitting with some of those experiences, I was like, snap. You know, even I was sort of taken aback. Hearing about my mother's traumatic childhood also, you know, still deeply unsettles me to this day. You know, and you know, I think the question around 33-year-old Lesedi versus 25-year-old Lesedi, I guess will come later. But you know, I think, you know, in our relationship with our parents, there's a lot now that I understand, I guess, about their own relationship with trauma, violence, and suppression and the suppression of it, and how they might struggle to human at full capacity emotionally because of it. And this book is sort of my attempt at uncovering all of that in order to sort of return to myself.
Yeah. I was asking a few weeks back, and which is a bad question. So I wonder who are the psychologists who have written a really good book. But I don't know what I meant by a good book, but I was thinking the sorts of books that a guy called Wahbi Long had done. And here's somebody who's not a therapist, who's working in an NGO, but anyways, just writes this book that's both. That's really, I don't know whether the word beautiful is, but you should consider fiction after this, if you haven't done so.
Zotto, did you hear that? That's my...
You should consider that. I'm going to turn this, start with Nathan this time, and then go to Lesedi, and then end with you. In the graphic novel, Nathan starts with the story in Ukraine, 1920, and then maybe 20 years later, a mother is telling son, Andrei, about something that happened. So you make the connection between the story from Kharkiv, Ukraine in 1930, when a woman lost her son, Stephen Stefan, and was apparently spirited away by a babushka, and that's one version of the story, from the neighborhood and apparently eaten by the neighbors, right? Apparently. Or you can say something about it. And then the story you tell, which is the bulk of the story, being told by Damien in 2022, Damien de Jong from the Cape Flats, about the railway ripper that you've already touched on. But the murders of the colored boys, you might remember that story was in the papers in 1993, and a suspect was arrested. People can read about that later on. You don't have to reveal this. So the connection is just to be in this line. All that inhumanity that turns men to monsters lives in the gut. And then a few sentences later, the stomach is a parasite. I'm likely to be wrong because I was trying to find the connection, what you do in there as a novelist. Please set me right then. Please talk to us about the connection you're trying to make, if any, about the story in the Ukraine and the story about colored boys.
It's first of all, I think I like the way you kind of look for connections in things. I want to say that because to me it's also my best kind of way of approaching a subject matter. And in this case, kind of, the gut, the stomach has its own kind of nervous system, central nervous system. Right. That's a literal thing that resides in the stomach. That's why when you're stressed and those kind of things, that's why it affects your stomach. And part of that for me writing that was thinking about if that brain becomes dysfunctional, that brain, never mind this brain, if that brain is kind of ruled by hunger, and hunger is always accompanied with fear and uncertainty, when you start thinking only with that part of your body, when you have no choice but to think with that part of your body. Like in the instance of that story, it's not certain whether that really happened or not, but it's also, those kind of stories are based in things that happened during that time. Neighbors were eating each other's children. People were cannibalizing each other. So I think if you can imagine kind of, and we've seen this in history so many times, normal people. And one day I'm kind of greeting old Bali here. Next week I'm eating old Bali, you know what I mean? It's like, that's a jump to make. And that's a jump that you don't make for yourself. You're forced into that. There's something animalistic that shoves you into that. So kind of, I was looking at that. I was thinking about how I keep forgetting this writer. Oh my God! But I keep quoting his name, his book, but I keep forgetting his name. Is this Hunger Eats a Man? It's something that's always stuck with me. Kind of how hunger consumes you, how hunger consumes the parts of you that makes you human, and it's only this kind of wretched self that kind of that's left. And once that happens, you can expect anything from a person. I look at my own writing, and then I sometimes wonder, academics will come and they'll write like a piece about your writing, write a thesis about your writing or something. Or they'll use your writing and they'll kind of try to look at it through the Radian frame, whatever. And I always think it's like you can't write about this stuff because you never want to look at it through the Tupac frame. You know what I mean? Or the rap music frame or the gangster movie frame. And that's probably closer to what we experience. It's kind of the clues to the way we live. You'll find in those kind of things, because you have to listen to people talking about being hungry. You have to listen to people talking about I shot someone because I was hungry. You know what I mean? I robbed someone because I was hungry. That's the kind of people actually, if you want to frame this kind of writing, that's the kind of people you have to listen to. They'll tell you. I look at myself and I think You know, it's like the way we grew up. You know, I didn't grow up with my father was reading the newspaper and mama was playing the piano. You know what I mean? My love for art and literature, that developed. So who I am is not where I started from. So when I started, I would have been just as kind of rough, operating from this almost instinctive place as everyone else I grew up with. So that part of your story remains. So I think about myself and I think I'm kind of a, you know, I have sophisticated tastes. I'll say that. I'll give myself that. And I always think like, how can such violence exist in the same body? I listen to Andries talking, and I'm thinking. The first thing I'm thinking was, if I was in that gym, this is what I would have done, and I'd probably be dead now because I afterwards I would have discovered, oh, these are gangsters, fucked up. But that's the first thing you do is that kind of defensiveness is so programmed into you, kind of almost like on a primal level. It's I'm always thinking about my survival. Like I'll come in here, and I'm thinking what my escape route would be. You know what I mean? I'm like the fucking poor identity. But yeah.
Please think about when we get to the end, just read the part, just decide on that.
Yeah, sure.
But I'm going to go to Lesedi and Andries, just also think about if you want to read. Lesedi, I'm going to just let you read, but let me just start where it is. It's on page 40, about men are suspicious of other men.
Sure.
And so we don't show weakness, and then you can take it from there. So the context this is in a KSO. There's a lot in this book. I mean, there's a relationship, all kinds of stuff. So, you know, and Lesedi has just given you. So I want you to read maybe a couple of paragraphs on that. But here's the context, or here's the. So it feels at that moment that this is a character in novel, really. When you're saying this, when you these thoughts, there are thoughts there. Some of these are thoughts. So please speak to us about these thoughts after reading, which I take are your thoughts. You see what I'm trying to say? It feels like it's novelistic. It's like a fictional. But they are your thoughts, so speak to us about your thoughts, at least at the time, and you touched on this at Aneso during the group therapy session. So talk to us about men in particular after you've read, and talk to us about Lesedi at 25, 80, and then Lesedi now, today. About the thoughts you were having then. So it starts when you say men are suspicious of each other. You're talking to this man, character, Dean.
Right. So just in terms of kind of sort of like I guess how it's written. Like for me, there was three things always happening at once. There was memories, and then there was kind of what was happening in the moment, and then there was like interior thought, and I guess I was. Yeah, in a lot of ways, I was just trying to sort of like, you know, so when, you know, I guess when they were talking about fight or flight, I guess what immediately comes to mind is a memory of my own experience of it, and then just kind of reflecting on it. And so it was the same thing here, where we were talking about leisure time, Dean and I, you know, ultimately became very good friends, but initially, you know, there was a bit of tension there between us, and this is kind of where it then starts to play out, right? Where he says, you know, well, I really don't like doing things for nothing. Does that mean there's something wrong with me? With the idea being that leisure time is when you just kind of do things for the sake of it. Joan, who was the sort of group therapy lead. Some of these things felt like a classroom, to be honest. Sometimes it really felt like kind of a double period of, you know what I mean? And so Joan, you know, like sort of standing up front, and she was kind of running the session, you know, sort of around leisure time and how we use it. Then Dean continues and said, okay, I'm speaking mainly for me, but maybe some of the other gents will get it. I never want to lose. So for me, there's no such thing as leisure time. It has to make me some money or be competitive, like sport. I won't do it unless it gives me the edge over something or someone else. He's right, I say. I mean, have you guys seen dudes play FIFA? It's a video game that can end friendships. It often turns into, oh, you felt that, Nathan. It's like, FIFA is a video game that can turn into a blood sport. Exactly, Dean says. We don't play FIFA for us. We play it for the room, for what others will think of us. We want to beat the other guy. I want to beat the other guy. I think it's a guy thing. I want to beat the other guy because my pride is at stake, obviously. Oh, sorry. This is where you want to be. Men are suspicious of...
This is all good. Let's go. Good.
So men are suspicious of other men, and we don't show weakness because they might take advantage of it. Naivete might prompt the death of you. In the scramble for finite resources, there's no bread for the man who does not stand his ground. There's only ridicule and shame, humiliation. Nice guys finish last, they say. Yes, it's true. For men like Dean and me, every activity must qualify our strength to others and remind would-be harm-doers to approach with caution or not to arrive at all. I think Dean is right, I say to John. The room turns its attention to me and suddenly there are audience to a public conversation between Dean and me. I don't think I've ever done anything simply because it was fun. Where is the time for that when you have to work yourself from a deficit to make some money and provide for your loved ones and become a better and bigger person? There's no time for that. There's no time for leisure. We play FIFA to win, not for fun, because there are many ways to be a man, but there's only one way to be a male, that's to win. To be an alpha male, win. Win the girl's heart, win the contract, win it being the funniest in the room. You must find a way of winning and stick to it. We can all dance, but not everyone is a good dancer. Be a good dancer. If you can't dance, learn to throw a punch. The funniest, tallest, richest, most masculine presence in the room is the one others fall for, the one frightful men do not approach. Dean is talking again, I suddenly realize. Males are not supposed to feel insecure, he says. We're not meant to be that emotionally invested to begin with. That's supposed to be the female's job or the woman's job, he whispers. I guess what I'm saying is I don't know how to do anything for fun. Implying that he does things for fear. A worried look crosses Joan's face, but it's quickly replaced with excitement as if she's had a light bulb moment. She remains calm and queries Dean further. Joey also says that men can't play because leisure time must be earned for men. He adds that men must apologize for indulging their playfulness, or else they are considered unmanly. I don't remember much else from the session after that. Yeah.
This people call men that really messed up, aren't they?
Sorry?
There's people called men that they can't play. Yeah. But you want to say something a little bit about that, about now, your thoughts, what was happening when you wrote that?
So it's like...
not when you wrote that, when this was happening, yes.
Yeah. So I guess in writing, I was really trying to stay true to the kid, the 25-year-old version of me at the time, and to really to really, I guess, stay true to his fears, rational and irrational, and that influenced, I guess, how I wanted to write the book. Generally was, I believe, to a large extent, a lot of our mental health challenges have to do with our material conditions. And we often ignore that part because we place the onus on the individual, especially masculine identities. Listen, you better figure things out, and doesn't matter what how violent things are structurally, you must somehow, when I Tepo go next door, you know what I mean? It's like, Tepo from next door has a vrpa, and these are the kind of, sort of tensions that a lot of men sort of kind of live with, where the onus is placed on the individual to kind of contend with forces out of their control, structural forces out of their control, to kind of create a life and to survive, essentially inside a system that's trying to kill you. And so for me, it was important to write the book in a way that didn't feel like a finger wag, or in a way that didn't feel like sort of that kind of self-help tonality. That sort of, you know, here are 12 steps to do well. For me, it was here are 12 missteps you are likely to make, and that's okay. And a big part of the problem, especially for men, is the shame that comes with being wrong. Because once again, you're not, you know, it's playfulness. I think a big part of play is allowing yourself to kind of be wrong and make those mistakes. Right. And so, looking back, I wanted to sort of honor the kid and his fears at the time, as irrational as they were, and knowing much better now, you know, it was, I think, important to still kind of, you know, invite, I guess, others or the reader to sort of travel with me as I kind of make my mistakes, to, you know, find clarity, learn as I go along. Like I said earlier, like I learned at the clinic about some of my mother's traumatic childhood history, which then changed a lot of, you know, which kind of really helped me to see, in fact, both my parents as human beings, you know, outside of the role that I think they're meant to play. And I think masculinity is the same thing, it's a role. And there's something quite, you know, freeing and human about, you know, I guess approaching it in that way that I wanted to write 12A as. You know, it's not a self-help vibe. It's just sort of a human story about the fears and kind of how, you know, our material world does have an influence on kind of how we feel. And in this case, I think the myth of scarcity and living in an unequal country means that you're going to be battling for finite resources so much that you'll turn to each other and fight each other, as opposed to finding an ally in the room like Dean and I.
Well, thanks for that, man. You know, I would have wanted to connect to love because it's a thing for me, but I'm not going to go there for you. So I'm going to ask this question somewhere, just the second half of the book. So this book, as you said, is a story you're trying to make sense. Andries, what's going on around you? And you take off from that February moment. So it's a meandering story. I like the way it's written, by the way. I find that I think better, not, you know, to approach it, just you know. So it's a story of racism, of violence, of inequalities, of men, of work, of shame, of trauma. Now here's the question. So, but please don't just hang on to the answer. What do you want people to take from this book? You make an odd 10, though, and it displeases me, but it's a good thing because it means I read the book again and again. You make it an odd 10. You say you don't have a beef with this aggressing man who humiliated you. Your issue was with the club. So please explain this to us. So there's a second part. Please explain this to us. The white man was not only violent, a bully. You make a connection with Paul Rose, right? Paul Rose, yeah. That sort of thing happens, but it happens, as we just heard from Lesedi. It's this thing of men one-upping each other. So how can you turn away from him? Do you stick to that? I mean, or because you just said something earlier on today. Do you stick to that? Is it because you think there is no hope for this people like humans like him? Or were you afraid to? Will you be afraid to confront other racists in the future? Because you mentioned at the other moment where you were in a queue and a white woman did something, a Karen, what we would call a Karen, does something. So what should people do when they're harassed? And Nathan just said this. Yeah. So some of us, something kick in, like you just go blind, like, no, this is not going to happen here. Of course, you'll regret it, you'll be dead, but yeah. So what should people do when they're faced by white racist bullies, bullies in that situation? Talk to us about this. What do you want people to take from this, particularly as regards to Karens and white bullies, or that moment, it connects with that moment when your grandfather was basically humiliating the black workers,
Yeah.
right? What should people do then?
That's a lot of questions.
It
to
is,
answer
it
in
is.
one
But
go.
the one thing is, so what should people do?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think in the middle of all of this, when I realized, oh my goodness me, I've stepped on the toes of somebody on whose toes you don't want to step. I had a flash. And one of the things that I was really thoroughly aware was that although I was challenging these white men on their behavior, what I was doing was not helping the black women in the situation one little bit. In fact, it sort of escalated from there. I wanted Virgin Active to expel the men from the club. I mean, they threatened me with violence, they'd spat in my face, they'd taken a photograph of me, all of things which are, you can read the club rules, you can't do that. And Virgin Active management were not taking action. They said, but you call them racists, as if I was asking for it. And I realized that if this escalates further, what the server, who I call Vuyakazi in the book, how she's going to experience this is that I got her into trouble. They're going to ask her, do you think the men were racist? And she's going to say, no, they weren't, because she's at the class position and a race position where she can't speak back. And so what would it help her? And so I had a flashback to another incident a few weeks before where a white woman was horrible to a black server, and I spoke to the black woman afterwards, and I said, I'm really sorry for her behavior. How do you handle that really well? How do you manage it? And I felt I was able to restore some dignity in that moment, and I felt that was more skillful. As to why I don't feel I have a beef with men, I suppose I wonder whether I can reply to that by reading a section of or whether we've got time.
Do this.
Yeah.
You can take 2 minutes.
Yeah, let me just actually try to speak for a second. So what I realized is that where bullies act from is from a position of shame. The bully's world is one where in order not to be shamed, I have to shame somebody else. And it's that very tiny constricted place. And what I was doing when I was calling these gangsters on their behavior was I was pulling rank. I was sitting there with my Mac PowerBook laptop and my very nice shirt, and I was telling them in very Ponzi Afrikaans that they were not behaving like proper white men. That's really, in a way, between the lines what was happening. So I was shaming them, and they responded in kind, and in a way, I've come to the place where, in a way, I just feel I feel sorry for a person whose sense of self is so constricted that this literally is the way in which you have to conduct your own life. And in a way, there are people who live by the gun and by the knife, and in which to show a moment of weakness is to, things could end up quite badly for you. So you always have to. I mean, I would say I was much more angry with the fact that Virgin Active found it so difficult to do the right thing. And I mean, Virgin Active management knew who I was dealing with, and they were not willing to disclose the identity of the men to me. And there's the moment that, in ways, where my anger is concentrated, is the moment where I'm sitting with a regional manager of Virgin Active, and I say, do you know who they are? And he says, no. And I say, show him the newspaper picture. There's a gangster. He says, oh yeah, we knew that. And I thought, is this what you are made of? So that's where my sense of a beef was.
Yeah,
So-
it's not displeasure, it's not displeasing. It was disappointment. I hear you, absolutely. And thank you for the response. Could you take a couple of questions from you? I'll take you. Do you have a mic somewhere, please? Front.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having this discussion. I think as South Africans, we need more of this. Andries, I think I will direct the question to you because of the identity in it. So I'll give context. I grew up in Bloemfontein, went to Oranje Meisie School, which is an Afrikaans girls' school, top Afrikaans school. Experienced the worst racism I could have experienced in that Christian environment, right? And I'll reference two experiences to ask the question I want to ask. One, on a particular day, we were having an Afrikaans class, and the teacher decided, let's go sit outside, right? And we sat on the grass. But we were so comfortable in our pampun roka, we just relaxed, man. And her comment was to the white girls next to us. Okay, so I'm gonna say her name because no one knows her. Anai, wat meisie lê nooit neer, man. Let me try to formulate it again. She was laying, so we were laying next to her. Her eye contact was to Anai. She says to her, "Wat meisie lê nie swani," of enige meisie, right? So this is a white teacher in an Afrikaans Christian girls' school who's supposed to teach us women empowerment, but she came with this racism in her to remind us that this is white grass and you're going to behave like a white person. I want to hear from you, how should we as black people feel human around white people when they always treat us like this? Because that was the first example. The second was when I needed to be helped with lunch. So this is a very expensive school. My mom can't afford everything. She has to help me with lunch. The teacher was concerned with me going to the principal to ask for help and not going to her. So I didn't give her the opportunity to be the white savior, right? So how do I, as a young South African who was born post-1994, reconcile with all this mess? Because, like, I didn't invite it, but it's still within the system. So I don't know if you can find a way to answer that question, but like, how do we deal with this pain of being you black in this country, but you still have to be, jy moet reg sit, jy moet, soos 'n wit meisie aangaan, you know, so, yeah.
Please.
Yeah, now it's my turn to get angry again. So that's it. I don't have an easy way to answer your specific question. What comes into my mind is somewhere in black skin, white masks, Frans Fanon says, when colonialism has been dismantled, then the colonized will be able to see the humanity of the colonizer. And I'm always struck by that. What a huge statement that is. On the one hand, it's a universalist position. I mean, Fanon is saying it should be possible for us to encounter each other as humans, but it's not by pretending race is not in the room. And in a way, how do we get to that position where we're able to see each other's humanity? I think it is by going into all of this horrible material that we've been given by our past, and in a way metabolizing it in some way or another. So I don't have an answer to your question, but I think it is the question that should be with all of us. Thank you.
Another question? Yeah, right at the back. Please.
Hi. So this one's for Lesedi. So I suppose the South African reality is one that doesn't really allow people to transcend survival mode, right? So since leaving the clinic, with this yearning to human, as you say, how have you managed to do that considering the constant demands of surviving South Africa, but also the demands of your manhood?
The demands of, sorry, was that the demands of my manhood?
Yeah.
Threw that out the window as soon as I published a memoir. I was just like, I'm kidding. After leaving the clinic, I was still struggling a lot. I think with you leave and you've made all of these friends and you have a new chain smoking habit, and you have all of these tools, and it's really hard. It's a lot harder to integrate, I think, the tools you learn into your daily life than it is to integrate the chain smoking habit. But you try, I guess, So for me, my mom then passed away at a time when I was still trying to work through my relationship with her, which was at the heart of, really all of it. She then passed away in 2018, and I think that's when, that's when things just things started to just feel so much more real. And honestly, I wasn't thinking about my manhood. I wasn't even thinking of survival mode. It's just everything just felt more real. Everything just felt more urgent. Everything just felt more like, I don't know what it was supposed to feel like to plan your own mom's funeral, but it was a moment for me where, after suppressing so much and kind of, the dissociation, everything just came rushing back, and everything just became like doubly as real, and it was just impossible to ignore. I think writing has helped. Writing has helped, so much of, there was this fragmentation also for me, where there was kind of what was happening in my inner life that I never really shared with anybody. And then I kind of had this outer life, I guess, avatar, if you will, I don't know, sort of, and at that point, everything came crashing together. And because of how much I'd suppressed over time, I think also just even the process of writing this book was, for me, important in kind of, stepping out into the world, not as dull, as Dr. Kopano described earlier on, right, where you're so suppressed that you can't really feel anything, and if you can't really feel anything, then you do feel quite dull. You can't really human at capacity, but it's actually sort of trying to gradually and slowly get back in contact with the emotional world within that you can, I guess, start to feel more. But when it happened in 2018, everything came. I couldn't not human. It was impossible not to human. After my mom passed away, and everything just kind of came crashing back. It was just urgent, and very real. And it's. I hope that answers your question. I was forced to rehuman by grief.
Can I take 60 seconds of your time? We're over time, but maybe can you read this because I want people to the cadence of the language. Is where Fiona is. It'll be 60 seconds of your time.
Okay. My ma's sister Fiona, as my sien sê sy altyd, sy moet uitkyk vir die man met die kinders vang. Nie saam met manne gaan wat sy nie ken nie. As ons jou weer kry en let sy ook handjies agter die rug, popol in die lug. Dan lag sy so lekker dat sy ook maar moet saam lag. Iets wat ek weet, is dat ek nooit bang was vir die rippe nie. Dat hy my dood sal maak. Ek was bang hy ryp my en dan los hy my daar in die bos. Hande agter die rug, popol in die lug. Jou maar leer dit vir ewig. Met mense soos my auntie wat lag vir my. Ek kan nie onthou dat ek bang was om dood te gaan nie. Miskien was ek. Maar ek was altyd bang om dood te gaan in 'n undignified way. Dus in die middel van lag vir iets pijn of de val van 'n hoë dak af.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Yes, man.